Hello, today we're going to do fork seals on a 2024 Beta 300RR. First off, do anything you see here at your own risk. I make these videos very short and brief, assuming that you have general knowledge of repairs. So let's get started. First thing, Beta's website does have a good comprehensive sheet manual, so I'll put the description below. If you don't have a good vise before you take the forks off, I suggest loosening these two bolts and loosening the top nut while it's on the bike. Back off the adjusters the entire way counterclockwise. Take a soft jaw and remove the top cap all the way. Now you need two very thin wrenches to squeeze between the spring. Sometimes you got to move it around a little bit to get on the actual nut. Then you just loosen the two opposing each other to pull the top cap off. It screws off pretty easily after you get it loose. Then you take the spring out. Should come right out. There might be a spacer below it. Be careful of that. You drain the oil. Take the adjusting rod out, keep everything clean. And then for this, I did have to use an impact gun. You can try with a 17 millimeter, but it does spin in there. Used an impact gun to take it off. You separate the tube from the inner and the outer. That's what you're left with. Now you take a screwdriver and you pry the dust cap carefully. Don't want to score the tube. Going around it a few times to loosen it up. Pull that up, and then there's a retaining clip in there. I know, sorry for the bad angle, but you pop the retaining clip out, once again being very careful to not scratch the tube. And then it's time to separate the tube from the slider. Pull with some force and it'll pop out. Now it's time to take the Teflon rings off. You separate them with a screwdriver. Sorry for the bad camera angle again. And they should slide right off the top. There's two of those. Keep those in a safe, clean place. There's a better angle of that. Take off the washer, the fork seal, the retaining clip, and then the dust cap. Clean up the tube, inner and outer. Then I use electrical tape to protect the installation of the dust cap and the fork seal. I put a little bit of grease on there. I use wheel bearing grease. First, I put on the dust cap, being careful to not rip the sealing edge. Push it down out of the way. I did put a little bit more grease on the tube there to protect the oil seal. So I put the retaining clip on. Now it's time for the oil seal. I'll put some grease on that as well. Be very careful around the top. Push it down out of the way. Next comes the washer. I cleaned that up a little bit to put that on. Then I think I take the electrical tape off for the two Teflon sleeves. Make sure to clean the Teflon sleeves with a lint-free rag. And I clean the tube. And slide those on carefully. I didn't show putting the two tubes together, but now it's time to seat the seal and the bottom tube. Start it with your hands. And if you don't have a seal driver, I think it's 48 millimeter, you can use a PVC, I think it's 2-inch slip joint cut in half. I used this for a long time. It works well, and you can hit it down a little bit. But I will use a seal driver here to get it set all the way. You can get the seal drivers off Amazon. They're not too expensive. But you don't want to make it sealed so you can see the clip for the retaining ring. So it needs to go down pretty far. Now for the retaining ring. You got to get it in the detent on the outer tube. Once again, being very careful to not scratch the tube, the sliding tube. Now it's pretty easy just to hammer the dust seal in. Now I'll clean the inner cartridge. Sorry for the camera, it got some oil on it. Reinstall it into your tube. Line it up with the bottom. It sits in pretty deeply there so that you can screw the bottom 17 Allen nut onto it. At this point, I just snug it up. Take it over to the clamps and torque it down. Torque specs are in the manual from Beta. Getting close to the end here, cleaning out the adjusting rod, putting that down the center. Now it's time for some oil. Fill the oil up. I think I used 5 weight. That's what's recommended. To the height that's listed in the manual. And I just used a paper dipstick to get it right. But first you need to bleed the chamber. Just go up and down a few times with that inner cartridge. You'll hear air bubbles. And then when you don't hear air bubbles anymore, you fill it up to the level that you want to use. I used a paper dipstick from the top of the tube to the top of the oil level for the recommended airspace levels. And here's the levels in the manual. Now it's time to put the spring back in with that spacer. Put the wrench on and I kind of screw it down so that the inner center cartridge doesn't fall down. Continuing to put the top cap on, you do need to screw the black spring guide all the way down so the top cap sits as deep as it can on the rod. Tighten those up, and then you tighten the top cap onto the tube. I use some soft jaws here until I get it on the bike, and then I finish tightening once the bottom clamp is on, just the same as the removal step. And that's it for replacing the fork seals on a 2020 to 2024 Beta open cartridge fork. Pretty easy job. If you see that I did anything wrong, don't hesitate to criticize. And good luck.